Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Revivalcast. So, get Skype unmuted there so you can hear everybody. We have, again, of course, the always consistent and faithful Diggs, along with Polaris back again to join us this week. And it looks like OBS is picking up my mic. I hope you guys can hear me. I totally gaffed with another stream a couple days ago and had no audio for quite a ways into the stream until somebody was able to point it out. But yeah, welcome to another show. Today we have. I wanted to go longer. I wanted to go a 2-hour show because, for one, it's way easy to talk about this game for 2 hours, and additionally, really, it'll be kind of like my last episode for a little while. I think just handling some other stuff with real life and stuff. So we'll have a cool episode today. We've got a couple of blogs to talk about as well as at least one big thread. I think it was a pretty big thread, and then some other smaller threads. But I'll let the other hosts say hello, and I will double check all our settings.
Polaris, you're the guest, so anytime we say we're going to go around the robin, you have to go first.
I see. It's good that you tell me that now. Hi, everybody.
I've been enjoying this past week. The forums really picked up, and I love being in the forums and reading new stuff. I'm actually quite surprised. I fell asleep last night watching the Dop crew play their game, and Snipe Hunter's been up fairly early this morning answering stuff in the forums, and my mind is reeling by some of the stuff that I've just read recently, just in the last 15 minutes. I think we'll have a couple of weeks of great material to talk about.
Awesome. Yeah, Polaris, welcome back again. It's good to have you. I thought we had a pretty good episode a couple weeks ago. I'm sure the community was happy to have Polaris, and so we have her again this week. So I'll just jump right into stuff. The very first thing we have is developer blog 60, which was from 2 weeks ago, and that was the one covering the life of a nomad. I believe Ambla was the one who wrote that one. I'm pretty sure he does all the day in the life type episodes of those. So yeah, does anybody want to jump off on it first before I go on my usual long rant?
Go on your rant. Go start us off.
So yeah, for me, obviously, both these last two blogs have been particularly interesting to me, just because everybody kind of knows I kind of want to have this, drifter character type. If I can afford to invest and maintain a sea vessel, I definitely want to do that. If I can't, then obviously the next best thing would just be, a roaming nomad, blade for hire, just someone who's out exploring, and an awesome way to make income that way, I think, would be through cartography. Just a little bit of bonus income by taking what you're doing and applying it to try and get yourself some leverage to do some other things in the game. So both these blogs really interesting to me personally. But yeah, the nomad blog I thought was really interesting because you have this character that's basically going around exploring the world, keeping track of things, and she's got some skills in a few different things, and she's kind of just wandering around for the sake of wandering around and exploring the world. Her agenda is not necessarily to, there's not like a specific agenda as far as like some of the other things that you would get in a typical MMORPG, like grinding up through a certain profession or anything. She's just doing whatever she needs to do to get by. And I thought it was kind of interesting to get a peek into the Nomad, and it's 2 weeks ago, so it's a little bit hazy to me, but I just remember liking the way she kind of heads around from place to place and starts, she uses what skills she has, and obviously she's developing things as she's going around exploring. And getting the tag thing, I think, is really interesting, just because of from what we know of the tagging system, how those are going to transmit, onto a player, and then a player who is in that nomad type lifestyle, going very long distances and carrying these tags, a really long ways is probably the biggest kind of behind the scene appeal to me. I think mechanically, it'll be interesting to see how tags spread around the world. With people that are kind of these explorer types, especially if they're participating in the next blog, which is cartography, and noting some of that stuff down and sharing it and passing it out, selling it, whatever they can do, with cartography, and some of those tags sticking to it and getting filtered around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main things that concerned me with the Nomad blog was Fawn was spending quite a bit of that day or a couple of days in the rain. I might be concerned about how that's affecting her health. But I guess she's got a tent with her. She's stoking a fire, so maybe she can stay fairly warm throughout that. Um, but yeah, there's also another little mention there. In case by now the dev drop of the camps starting up and being built into towns might be lost in the forums. So it's nice to have that mentioned there in the blogs for newbies coming in. That little bit of a hint that these nomad camps might turn into towns if people are dedicated enough to turning them into towns.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that was my big takeaway was the town thing. There's a paragraph dedicated to this burgeoning camp that could become something someday, and already traders have started coming, and there's already this little trickle of activity happening that makes it grow. And it's like, there we go. There's our hints about how this actually works in terms of gameplay. I thought that was just cool.
Yeah.
yeah. I think both the 2 points you mentioned, Diggs and Polaris. I think the combination of those kind of highlights the other big thing I think that is going on in Revival is that um, player agency and how there's this push and pull. Players are obviously going to have an impact on the world of Revival, but at the same time, the world's going to have a pretty big impact on players, which in a typical MMORPG, we don't really get any agency, which we've covered a lot in past episodes of Revivalcast. But at the same time, the world doesn't affect players in MMORPGs very much at all. Also, which I don't think we've really pointed out in a ton of detail in the past episodes. But obviously, you know, I think that's a fair, safe statement to make. And obviously in that blog with the weather, really determining, having a big determination on what Fawn is doing in on that typical day, because of she isn't in a protected environment. Like if you were in a city, and you were a diplomat, you could probably do a lot of your business indoors. The weather might not have an effect. There would be other things affecting you. For Fawn, the weather had a huge effect on her. So um, that was interesting to see. And then obviously the extension of that, I mean not the extension, the flip side of that, the player actually getting to kind of play a small role in determining a possible expansion of a new settlement. So it's kind of interesting to see that just in like a quick snapshot in the one developer blog. You get a good snapshot of how Revival is going to be actually different than other games, or other MMORPGs to be specific, just because it's going to be. And I hate using that term. I know we like to use the word meow. The devs do also, but for anybody that might be watching Revivalcast that has no idea what a meow is, um, multiplayer evolving online world. MMORPG, I would still classify Revival as an MMORPG, but trying to pin it into what we expect from a traditional model isn't wise. So, but yeah, it is one. It's just very unique, and I think this last dev blog, or sorry, the previous dev blog was a great example of why that is the case.
Snipe Hunter wrote in chat that yeah, it might not just be tags that Fawn is spreading as she travels. If she ends up catching something. Um, one of the things too is what's the behavior of the animals going to be like in the rain? If you're a hunter and you're out hunting, are the animals going to be trying to stay in their shelters, keeping warm and out of the rain too? Is that going to change their behavior? That'll be interesting to take a look at.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see as we get further in this process, into stage 3 to stage 4, to see how, and I think Snipe Hunter mentioned it kind of in the beginning of the previous blog of 61, talking about, the design for Revival and some decisions they were making and stuff like that, of how much simulation of a real world type setting and how much do you gamify it and things like that. So it'll be really interesting to see how much we get of those things, like you said, Diggs, of the animals actually reacting to the rain as well. Um, that would be pretty crazy to have, for all of it to be that intricate. And I don't know how complex or stuff that would be to code, but, if they were able to achieve that type of simulation inside the game, that would be pretty amazing. It would just increase the immersion a lot, I think, to do that. So
Yeah, I thought it was a really fun blog. It highlights Nomad as a gameplay element, which a lot of folks are interested in. But it also really, really plays up two of the systems, weather and the build out of a camp into a town. And I think that as a package is one of the best blogs that we've had because it highlights these three super important elements of the gameplay that Revival has.
Yeah, and hopefully these, it mentions what her kit is. She has the canvas, the bedroll, a tinderbox, cook pots, a small bundle of food, and from a role playing aspect of actually role playing through camping out. And hopefully, when we think about the mini games and the kind of equipment that you carry, uh, the kinds of equipment that you're utilizing in the mini games will have an effect on the outcome. So, how does all of that play into her hygiene, her health, making sure that her food is, however food is going to impact the buffs or health of our characters. You can get into some really deep role playing aspects of that just from those aspects as opposed to them just being, you know, items to take up room in your inventory and not really be particularly helpful um, uh,
yeah,
gameplay.
I think that one of the best things that we've gotten in the past few years in the gaming industry, with the kind of the rise or the rebirth of sandboxes. There's been a lot of them out, basically ever since Minecraft came out and really got popular. I think the sandbox genre really rose, but the idea that resource management really kind of took a new, not really a new, but I think in survival sandbox games, resource management really became a unique thing in an online multiplayer game where you're actually able to trade resource and stuff. Because before that you had resource management in a single player game, and then MMORPGs kind of what they evolved into. There's some obviously a lot of resource management with your health and mana and all that, but actual inventory, with those being resources. There was some, EverQuest, you trade some food or different things, but there wasn't too much. And I think Survival Sandboxes really kind of did a great job of making sure that when you're playing a survival sandbox, really everything in your inventory is a resource of some kind. It has a purpose somewhere to do something. It's not just gear or a quest item or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how much in Revival, what things we have in our inventory, what role they play as an actual resource. And from what I understand, at least so far, of Revival's resources and stuff like that, everything in the game should be a resource to some extent, and they all have limitations. There's only going to be X amount of this or X amount of that, and the development team is going to kind of balance how much there is of one thing. So, or each certain thing. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, knowing how MMORPGs have been in the past and how survival sandbox games have really kind of made people think about their inventory differently. Maybe people haven't really consciously thought, but people do subconsciously handle their inventories differently in a survival game than they do an MMORPG. And I don't think it's just the genre. It's not just because, oh, I'm in a survival game, I have to manage my meager resources. I think the way the actual systems are designed is actually a big reason for that. So, but yeah, did anybody have any last thoughts on Developer Blog 60?
I do. One of the other things that was nice, along the same lines though, is as we're thinking about the weather and the difference between uh, the deserts of Anacotha and or a rainforest or some other tropical area, or even an Arctic area, is somebody was mentioning, I think in the PV one of the PvP threads about how and I think it was a fairly new person was concerned about people not wanting to take their armor off um, because of the constant threat of PvP, but just seeing the different places that Fawn has traveled had me reminded me again that we'll be wanting to change what we're wearing as well based on um, the weather or climate conditions of I guess the climate conditions of where we're at any given time. So
Yeah, I think a big thing, specifically with that point you're making, Diggs, every or point you brought up, I should say, that every there's a lot of people I think that read different things on Revival forums, and all of a sudden, brain goes to worst case scenario. They fear the worst, but everybody in Revival, every player in Revival is going to be dealing with the same consequences if they're in the same circumstances. So if you're out there trying to travel through the desert across some place, and you have to strip off your armor because you don't want to die of heat exhaustion or something like that, whoever's going to be hunting, ambushing you in that area, they're going to have to worry about that too. So it's not like they're going to be ambushing you with full armor. Maybe they will. Maybe that'll be like a play style. It might be a balance of mobility at that point. If you're crossing the desert, maybe ambushers will be throwing on their armor to ambush you, so you've got to use mobility since you'll be faster theoretically than somebody wearing a bunch of full plate. So yeah, it just brings in. I think that's the cool thing about Revival. It brings in some interesting circumstances, and people have to actually be creative. It's not just, okay, I throw on my best gear, you throw on your best gear, and let's see who can hit their rotation more efficiently than the other. So, and I think that's what makes Revival, a game that I'm interested in. Whereas a lot of the games in the genre have made me disinterested in MMORPGs for the last several years. So, but
I
yeah,
think you guys pretty much covered it for me. I especially love the last line of that section where Fawn says, "Well, at least it isn't snowing." I mean, that's just a really nice hit on all of the things you guys have mentioned in terms of the weather as a major component of your gameplay and a factor that you're going to have to consider wherever you go. And who knows how that story would have been written for Fawn if it was in Sky Pass. I mean, there's that it leaves you at a place where your imagination can go forward and extrapolate on that. And I think that's a fantastic place to have left it.
I
definitely.
agree.
So the next one we have, obviously, drop one more week down, and we are right into Developer Blog 61. And that one, obviously, I already mentioned a little bit before, briefly touched on it with dealing with cartography. Interesting to me, obviously, because I see it as a well, for one, disclaimer, I love cartography. Like doing some world building on my own. I've done my own and participated in the Cartographers Guild. If you guys aren't aware of that, just search up Cartographers Guild in Google, and you'll probably see the website for it. But there's a lot of really talented artists there that actually make maps, with Photoshop or whatever they use for their photo or their digital editing software. But so I really love that kind of stuff. It's always been really interesting to me, the idea of illustrating or communicating something about a world, visually through a two-dimensional surface. So, and I think from the little bit that we got in the blog of the actual mechanics of that, it sounds like it's going to be pretty interesting how players are going to have some input into, you know, what their map says, or what a map says, I should say, but also, potentially what their mini map says based on their skills in cartography or other abilities that might affect uh, the visual fidelity to their mini map. So, and I think in the blog specifically, I remember there's a distinction made about what a hunter might see as opposed to, I can't remember what the other one was, but seeing game trails versus seeing, runes or something like that. I think it was archaeology hunter.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, I mean, those kind of things are interesting to me because, um, when you get a profession in a typical MMORPG, it just has a purpose, like one purpose, and you go to it for that. Okay, I want to, jewel craft or whatever, and you just go up through your jewel crafting and because you want to augment your armor or whatever. And the interesting thing I see with Revival's professions, if you want to call them professions or whatever term you call them, is that they're like, they're like little pinballs on a huge map. They're bumping around with all kinds of other different systems. Obviously, there's a lot of interaction between the different professions just because, everybody's got a mini map, and all your skills actually might change what you're seeing in that mini map. So, and they just showed the hunter and the archaeologist, but you could think of any skill set out there, if it has something that maybe it might communicate something different on your mini map, maybe sailing or whatever the profession, whatever skill might be with nautical exploration, that would obviously probably change your mini map when you're on the seas. So all that kind of stuff I think is really intriguing.
Yeah, that just has me wondering, if you're a whaler and you're on the sea, is that going to help you? Well, that, goes into the kind of game trail type thing, right? Um, what's the migration path of the whales? That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and I think too, like any any skill, like you can, I don't know who somebody out there, I know somebody could probably say in the chat, or we could link in the chat, has begun compiling a list of all the known, confirmed, or whatever skills and things like that, skill sets or things you can learn. Um, it'd be interesting to actually take the concept of this blog, or just the concept of professions affecting the mini map, and just go down that list and start thinking of how different professions would affect the mini map. And that,
That's right.
yeah, it's pretty crazy, really. Like I've said it a couple times, but I would not want to be the developers on Revival, just because uh, there's so many ways these things can interact. Getting them to operate properly will probably be just chaotic and stressful when that time comes. But I do think it's totally possible, especially the more forethought you can put into it. Obviously, the less you'll have to, hopefully, less permutations you'll have to deal with, negative ones on trying to work out bugs and different things like that. So, or bad bad combinations of circumstances, I would say. But it should be interesting. But yeah, go ahead, Polaris. I think I had to cut you off there.
No worries. I was reading that blog. I was reminded when back a very long time ago in high school, when I was studying geology, part of the study was actually map building. So you were building terrain maps, and you were working with basically what the terraform of your landscape looked like. So you were building kind of 3D maps of that, and it was a very cool thing. And this blog has kind of brought me back to that place of how much I enjoyed it. It might have been something that I'd chosen to do in real life if it had occurred to me at the time. So yeah, I'm really excited for cartography, and and just extrapolating on all the different skills that we know. Alex, we're working on the blog or the wiki at this point, and we already know there are more than 200 skills. So
Right.
we have some 50 some odd in the list on the wiki, but we know that there are at least 200 right now. So yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, one of the things that I loved about the blog, and I kind of riffed on it in some ways, but the in the forums, but really the main idea that was running through my head as I was participating in this particular thread is um, wanting to bring a cartographer along with you as you're adventuring. Possibly because each individual has, maxed their skills in other things. Um, and the cartographer might be the person who's going to help them share that information with each other in a better fashion. I think there's somewhere in there that says that we can, each person could make a map, but if you have few skills in cartography, then you might not be able to get as much information on there. It might not be as accurate. So, um, having a cartographer along with you, someone who's primarily a cartographer, has that maxed, um, instead of having, combat maxed. I love that level of role play where everything is not about a combat role in your group.
I think taking your point there and expanding it on to what we were the point we were just making before about every skill impacting your mini map. It really actually brings an emphasis to your particular trade skills having an impact in the greater world and having a value because beside from what they just do, just the simple explanation or example you provided, Diggs, you go out adventuring. Um, depending on the situation or where you're going, maybe you'll want a hunter along with you. Maybe you'll want, somebody who has, some skills in something because they're going to actually help you avoid certain dangers that you might want to avoid. Especially, I think Ambla's mentioned several times, and Snipe, the different types of dangers that'll be in Revival, especially when you go to, very far remote reaches and maybe, ruins way off to, maybe you get a note or, maybe you find out about some specific horror that's there, something, specifically supernatural. So, before you go out, you prep, you do all the prep that's required beforehand to prepare yourself for that encounter. And, you're taking with you a lot of stuff that's going to help you combat some ethereal force. You're not going to be wanting to run into grizzly bears and, things, physical, dangers when you're all kitted out basically to take on stuff from another dimension. So I think it's really interesting. Just the fact that the skills can affect the mini map and the way the world of revival is set up. All of a sudden, everybody has value depending on what their skills are because they can help other people in a lot of ways. And I think it really adds to the whole socialization of the game because you're not just. I think one of the big kind of like failures of modern MMORPGs is that outside of combat roles, in group finding in a raid or a dungeon, like there's no role value to anything specific about your character, like zero. Your profession, most people have alts to cover all the different professions. If a game limits them, they'll just have multiple accounts, or especially with everything free to play now, it doesn't cost you any money to upkeep an account. So, yeah, I think it's a really cool way that they're achieving that in Revival. So watching that blossom will be probably one of the best, most enjoyable aspects for me. Just kind of viewing it from a design standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, often when you're out with a group in the wilderness, um, if you're looking at your mini map, um, I think many people in the group, most people probably will be aware of um, dangers in the area. And in this case, you'll actually need somebody who's more aware of this than this and can call that out to you. Um, and like you said, you could often have alt. So you drop one character, you'd go craft something on another character, and then drop it and trade it or send it through the mail to your main character. But here, there's more incentive to actually have different people around you in the game in the moment, um, because in real time, their different forms of perception and awareness will be beneficial to you.
Yeah, I think another thing too about the way that skills are going to work in revival with what you use or what you're studying, what you're using is going to be your highest skills, and also too that you're not really restricted on. I mean, there will obviously be some restrictions, like you can't practice like holy magic and necromancy at the same time, just based on certain things, but it any game's going to have some restrictions, but the main thing is you can kind of whatever suits your playstyle or whatever you're doing in the game, you're going to be building up skills in these, and your specific skill set of maybe you have 3 or 4 skills really high. That specific combination of skills out of the, I don't know what Polaris said, some 200 something, you know that combination may be exactly what somebody needs. All of a sudden you have individual market value rather than just, hey, I have high jewel crafting. Anybody that needs that can come get it. In revival, there will hopefully be situations where your exact combination of skills would be preferable over the next person who has the highest jewel crafting or whatever. I keep throwing that one on as an example. I don't know why. I think I've always hated that profession in any game subconsciously. So I'm not sure, but yeah, anyways, I just think it'll be cool to see players get to carve out a niche for themselves, in not only what they want to do, but then also that having more than just role play value, which of course, for me, I love that it has role play value. I'll get a lot out of it from that. But for a non role player, there's also going to be built in, systemic value to what they are doing in the game, even if they don't give a crap about, you know, role playing or Shakespearean words or whatever it is. They think what we role players do. I don't know.
Yeah, I am looking a lot at the seeding of false data. That's going to be a game for a lot of players. The seeding of false data, whether it's in pamphlets or books or scrolls or maps. And I think that the cartography blog is just great for leaving a breadcrumb trail for how that might happen, and really letting imagination spark on how does that take place, how do you do it, like how do you play that mini game, how do you make that work. And then there's the whole after that, and I have a map, who can I sell this to? And what can I, do I want to make a name for myself as a good map maker? Do I want to be in the shadows as somebody who just sold you a false treasure map? I mean, there's just so many ways to play that, and that is really fun.
Yeah, the intrigue off of that too. You get a map and then you go through all this. You go out somewhere and you realize it's totally bad. Then it builds the intrigue. Okay, why did this person give me a bad map? Or why is this person dealing with in bad maps? Why would they do that? And all of a sudden you start having a whole new adventure to investigate if you want. To go find out. You know why this person jacked you for money, basically, or whatever you use to purchase that map, whether you traded for it or something. So yeah, it could be really interesting. I think especially too, I don't know, this just randomly occurred to me, but maybe somebody who has a good sense of item artifacts or something, and they realize you have an artifact that you don't realize is worth value. So they just make some thing of whatever no value to them to just trade you for it, and get something valuable. So it'll be really interesting to see. I think it's almost impossible actually to speculate, what all these systems can do when they interact. Just, I think there's so many possibilities. It makes it fun. You could sit here for days and just imagine.
Well, one, I mean, it was difficult. I said this last time. I think it was difficult enough when I came into the game last February. I was overwhelmed with the information, and now there's like what 10 times as much from when I
At
first
least.
came in, and um, and so then trying to go back and you know uh, wrap our brains around what we've just learned, and then go back to last year and add it to that and try and figure out what those connections are is it gives us still more to think about this year. One of the tidbits that Snipe Hunter wrote this morning, just a couple of hours ago, is where is it? It's not is that one. It's that the last thing. Oh, you can overwrite information on the map. And it's yeah, here it is. Uh, when you have multiple maps that show you the same area, there's a chance to overwrite information. So you could have one map that shows a city at a location and another that shows that space as a ruin, and it's whichever map you added last that would have the information that was preserved on your world map. So that's going to be like you were saying, Valix, that intrigue of this says it's a city, this says it's a ruin. Was it a ruin that's now become a city, or a city that's now become a ruin?
Yeah.
how, how do I know?
Yeah,
And
in that specific example too, it's really interesting because the storytellers, obviously, for the gold servers that are operating, free roaming, trying to come up with plots and devices and things to kind of push things around the map. They could take, we'll combine both blogs here. Fawn and a bunch of people have been in an area, started settling something, but say it didn't come to pass. It didn't actually become a settlement, but it did become notable enough for the storytellers to mark it down, and or for it to make it onto somebody's map somehow from some older map, and all of a sudden the storytellers go take, they go over that place and uh, maybe leave an item there that would be relative towards what a player, that was settling in that, trying to settle in that area would have carried, and all of a sudden it's got value or something, and all of a sudden you can spark a whole new thing off of that. I think it's really intriguing what can be done with the system that I think, and all of it's enabled really by the combination of storytelling, live storytellers that have access to every, anything in the game they can utilize and basically and manipulate to achieve storytelling narrative goals. So that combined with the tagging system, I think those two are just the superpower combo. They are Superman's strength and his laser eyes, maybe. But yeah, sorry, did I cut you off, Diggs? I just had that
nope,
thought and was running
nope,
on it. But
nope. That was fine. I was holding off in case Polaris had more to add. Um,
I think with us, we have about 15 minutes left here, so I will roll us right in because this is a big one. I think we wanted to talk about this week. So let's roll right into that, and I'll let you kind of kick it off, Diggs, with our next topic.
Well, yeah, I wanted to touch on the achievement thread that I started while you were still here because it was Talisman, the game that we've been playing. The Theory Forge hosts have been playing the last month or so. Um, it's a board game, a fantasy board game with cards involved, um, and it's on Steam. And Steam is giving us achievements. So, um, the way I've been playing through Talisman, so I'm a RPG guy. I like role playing. When this was first broached for us to play, I was thinking, I like RPGs. I don't really like board games. I don't really like card games, but if we're gonna play something together, I'll jump in and play with you guys. And even in our first playthrough, I was like, it was okay, but it's not really thrilling me. Um, and then I looked to play through again, looked at some of the other character types that I could play. I think the first time we played through it was a random roll, and I got a wizard. I wasn't too happy playing the wizard, didn't really understand its role. And then I chose an alchemist as my next one, and the alchemist had an achievement goal of spending the most gold or alchemizing the most objects or something like that. And after that, I started like ending each game I was playing by myself, trying to get an achievement and cycling through the characters just so I could get a new achievement. Um, and so here's this game that I was not expecting to enjoy playing, but it's the achievement system that's really hooked me into playing, and it started me thinking about how that could be applied to revival, especially for those different people. You know, there's Bartle has the four different game styles: achiever, explorer, socializer, and killer. And I had not thought at all before about how achievements um, might entice people, especially achievers, to play revival and keep playing revival, even though it, you know, I don't know, killing stuff might not be their primary interest, or exploring might not be their primary interest. And I was just wondering, Valix, if you had, if what you thought about achievements, talisman style achievements in revival.
Um, I don't know, like specifically for talisman style. The thing with achievements and talisman, I think they're interesting. Just kind of like basically add-on type things with Steam. But also too, I don't know if you mentioned it yet, but in talisman they have the runestone kind of thing too, which I think kind of works a lot like achievements. You accomplish some things, you can unlock a runestone, and then you can apply that to whatever character. But
So yeah, let me jump in and give a couple of examples. Like this had, like I think I mentioned, with the alchemists, it wanted you to convert objects into gold a certain number of times. I think with the elf, it wanted you to move from one wood space to a different wood space. The druid changes alignments. And so it can change from good to evil, and that will have you, if you're good and you land on the chapel, then that will give you health. If you're evil and you land on the graveyard, that will give you fate. So it just had me trying different aspects of the game in a way that I would not have if they didn't have achievements. I wouldn't be g- going through these different characters. So
well, to that I would answer yes and no. A little bit complex because um, I think achievements ideally should serve a ideally should serve a certain purpose in a game. And when you take revival into consideration, what it wants to do, I think for achievements to make sense in revival, uh, or yeah, really it doesn't even have to be just revival, but any game where the idea is that players are going to get into a character and they're going to do specific things based on what they want to do and make an impact on the world and have to react to changing conditions in the world. For me, I think the big problem with achievements well, not really a big problem, but with the way we see achievements in other games, whether it's Talisman or an MMORPG, you have an achievement that's kind of giving you. It's almost like guiding you around the world, like saying like, oh, try that. Like it's almost like a hint. Try this if you can see them ahead of time. If you can't see them ahead of time, then it's kind of like a little, mood lifter or something that's like, oh, I did something successful in this game or I did something noteworthy. Even if, for some people that means a lot to them, even if nobody sees it at all. And when I was reading through the achievements thread, there was kind of a lot of back and forth between people and about whether they want achievements to be known publicly or not, or how that's communicated. And I think the main thing I think people should think about when it comes to achievements is if obviously that's a huge game personality type, like Dick said. In the Bartle test, there's four. There's a modern version of the Bartle test I actually found a couple weeks ago. But yeah, it basically still has the same primary types. But so for people that want that achievement feel, there should be something in Revival that can provide that. I don't necessarily think ideally that it'll be talisman style achievements or the ones we're used to, but some way for people to get some type of you know notification, not necessarily notification, but for them to track their own progress through milestones. Whether that's recording things in their journals, or maybe the journal auto records things for them, depending on what is noted. And I think if there's things in there at a small level, like when you log into the game, your first 20 minutes of play or something, maybe you do get a little notification hint or something in your journal, like a little milestone achievement. You've walked, 200, 200 miles or something. I don't know. Just some,
Yeah, my example like that was visit every city on a continent.
yeah. So, and it could be anything for any profession. Maybe that's something that they need to do to make people aware of what skills or things are out there by having little tiny achievements that are invisible otherwise, but you do it and it says, hey, you've done this. And then you're like, oh, okay, so maybe I can go deeper into this tree, basically as almost like a tutorial. I've always viewed, in an MMORPG where the whole point is, immersion in the game, you don't want too much of it because it pulls away from being immersed in the game, but you do want enough that can actually guide players around, or at least help them be aware of different game features. But it's a tough thing to balance, because if you have too much, you're going to feel like you're in this gamey environment the whole time, and you're going to feel led around the world, too much, maybe, depending on if the achievements actually give you some type of in-game bonus. If they don't, obviously, which I think Snipe chimed in on that thread, or did he? About somebody said
Well,
it
yeah, and the
not
type
being
that I'm
in-game
wanting
bonuses.
are kind of like in Talisman. They don't really give you
Yeah, they
bonuses.
don't.
And what I would like is to have trophies that I can show off in my home, so that when people come out around for parties, they can take a look, and I can have stuff like I said, diplomas on my wall, or certificates, or even maps that I can frame, or the other big one that I'd really love to have, and I'd like to see that fleshed out somewhere. Like Snipe Hunter or Ohm would talk about newspaper headlines. So we do know that we're going to have achievements. Account-based achievements is going to be one thing. Um, and there will be character trophies as well. I think Snipe Hunter called them tokens, and I'm not sure how tokens differ from what I think of as trophies. Um, but there are going to be newspaper headlines somehow, so I'd love to know how our activities will make it into headlines. We haven't heard from Polaris yet. What have you been thinking about the whole achievements thing?
I think I posted in the thread that, but I don't remember if I did or not. And so I have a couple of things that come to mind, and little like catchphrases. So one of them is, um, the Pavlovian gamer kind of quality that comes from achievements. Some games are kind of known for having achievement spam, and there are a lot of people out there that chase those, and I don't feel like that really fits Revival. I could be completely all wet, but I don't feel like that fits. I have concerns about how achievements would be displayed or known, and I get the feeling that that's kind of a work in progress, so that's fine. I wonder about how achievements for the tallest, the biggest, the farthest, the whatever, the ist of something would work in an evolving world. So you climb the highest mountain, and then another mountain got added to the world that's higher. How does that work? Does your trophy go away? I mean, does your achievement go away because the world changed? So those are kind of my questions. The one thing
Yeah,
that I
but I mean,
like about, go ahead.
if you mainly I'm saying that because I don't know what the name of the highest mountain is, like Everest. So I would say Everest, but I don't think there is an Everest. But your trophy for climbing Mount Everest doesn't go away just because another higher mountain is discovered, right?
I
Right. I think the thing that I like about achievements and that I would love to see implemented is some kind of trophy system, things that you could actually put in your house.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
if the player is a skinner and skins the paw of whatever bear, old grizzly, and then takes that to a taxidermist and can make that into something to go on their wall, that I think would be awesome.
yeah
Beyond that, I'm not so
Yeah,
sure
that's
about
yeah.
achievements. I'm on the fence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think one of the interesting things too, at least maybe it was, I don't know if anybody else got this from reading Snipe Hunter's response in that thread, or maybe it was maybe it was, I don't know who else chimed in on that thread, but I just remember seeing um, this idea, and I think Snipe said it in the chat, just for, like about campaign ribbons or whatever. And for me, I look at Revival as the opportunity to kind of take achievements and turn it upside down in a really good way, because achievements are important. People want to have some record that they've done something cool, or whatever it is. I'm not much of an achiever at all. That's like my smallest score in that thing, so I don't know what it is, but obviously it's a big motivator for people to play. But I think Revival can provide that in totally different ways, because really, in any game basically you play these days, it's basically, ooh, I want that, so I'm going to do the thing to unlock the achievement to get that, whether it's titles or whether you just want to do it for personal appeal, or whatever. But I think in Revival, instead of it being, ooh, I see that, I want to go get that, it can be backwards, where you do something and then you get something cool. Relative, it's expected. You just maybe don't know exactly what it is. And I think that with the storytellers being able to create unique narrative situations and the evolving world providing like specific circumstances, I think Snipe saying like campaign ribbons is one way that you could provide basically an achievement type mechanic for somebody who cares about that stuff, that's participating in the narrative. They were, somebody who participated in combat at a specific battle in history, or maybe they were one of the founders of a settlement and they get some little achievement for being one of the people who helped, turn that settlement into a city, and all these kinds of things. You can just thread in these basically achievements through in-game actions, and instead of players being like, oh, I want to unlock this achievement, you realize through doing things that, you know, you're doing something that's leaving a history or a legacy in the game. So then it kind of inspires people to go out and do more things, to try and, earn more achievements basically by actually participating in the world, rather than, I always feel like achievements in a lot of games these days are so arbitrary. Like, especially if you use, you know, the big giant in the genre, World of Warcraft as an example, you can see all the achievements. You can just go, start grinding them basically, or, pursuing specific ones. And all of a sudden, your whole gaming experience is totally arbitrary to what you're actually doing in the world. Your character doesn't really matter at that point. But Revival has the chance to actually make achievements be tied to your character in a really meaningful way. So I'm hoping that they really kind of take advantage of that, take the bull by the horns kind of thing, and actually thread really unique situations where people can actually, whether it's through our journals. I'm not sure exactly how they plan to do it or what their ideas are, but I think there's a lot of ways that the developers can really make you feel important, whether you're role playing, whether you're just a power gamer, whether you're an achiever, socializer. I think there's a lot of new ways that they could do it because of this, dynamic model that they're using.
Well, and for me, it's not even so much about feeling important as feeling unique and different. So, um, uh, that, and again, it's not even so much about getting these firsts or that you're the only person that has achieved this thing. It's just if you can display these kinds of things around your home, then when I go to visit your home, I can say, "Oh, you're a mountain climber." You know, you climbed this mountain. Have you climbed this mountain? If you haven't, maybe we can go climb this mountain. Or oh, you make this potion or whatever. There's certain things that when you go and have a party, when you either have a party at your own home or you go to other people's homes for parties, you're learning more about their character as you're walking around their house.
Yeah,
Right, you were the one that discovered those ruins over there.
Right.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
you. Oh.
yeah, and I think Polaris mentioned it earlier about what using taxidermy as an example, to give yourself a type of trophy for that particular thing. I think if there are ways in the game for people of all the various skills or whatever, ways to kind of display that they're good at that skill without, you know, having to tell somebody, hey, I have 100 in jewel crafting. there should ideally the game should be built to where you don't need the arbitrary stuff, to communicate that. You could actually have an in-game item or some in-game mechanic that's actually communicating to people that you're really good at, X profession. So, and Polaris' example of skinning, and the trophy and taxidermy is a great one for that specific one. And I think if the developers are able to, find ways to do that for all the skills to some degree, where people can just kind of, if they start getting to know any other player, they'll immediately kind of have an idea of what that character's strengths are. Because I think also, too, that ties
Well,
back into the
here's
value.
the thing. It's not just the strengths, it's not just being really good, and I think people focus on that a lot. Um, there's value in also being really bad at something. There's value, role-playing value, in being the worst at something. Someone was, I think Cheshire was arguing, it was Cheshire and Onomaru when they were saying I couldn't have 21 alts because, what if I'm a farmer, and I couldn't be the best farmer. I could be a farmer that sucks at farming. That's all my crop, maybe I'm cursed and all my crops fail. I mean, that's a great thing to role play. It's not always about being the best at something if you're really interested in the role playing. People can look around and be like, wow, you are really crappy at that, aren't you? you know
Yeah, I can see that, from role playing and for immersion and just enjoying the game the way you want to enjoy it. I can see, there will be instances where you'll want to communicate that you're really terrible at something. Um, but I just kind of think of kind of the point I was getting to earlier, just having some type of way to visually communicate whether you're good or bad at something, or it just adds some tangible value to whatever you're pursuing in the game. Because if you do spend a lot of time getting really good at something, you shouldn't have to tell people that. I think in an ideal game model, if the game shows that, it's doing it really well, because then you don't have to spend time gloating or whatever. Your items, and I think that's what these lesser MMORPGs of current and the past have done in the past. They've just given you items to say, hey, I'm really good at this. I spent a lot of time doing this. I ground out this gear, and that's the way they've done it. And I think there's a lot of other ways that can be done besides just the gear you wear or the things decorating your house. I think there's a lot of ways it can be done, but it'll just amount to how much time the developers have to thread that stuff in. But it's definitely something, answering the four.
hey, we have 3 shifts of storytellers working 24/7.
Exactly. See, and that's one of the things that makes it so.
Somebody to make that happen.
Yeah, it's so unique in that respect too, because because of the storytelling team, they don't even necessarily need to thread in a lot of achievements and things like that other games do, because you have the developers can actually, they're tracking the data. They can say, oh, this person has achieved this, let's go plant an object or plant a tag, or do something to actually make that character the center of maybe exactly the type of attention they want, or maybe maybe they don't want, who knows. I guess it's just that they'll have to plan what they want to do and pay attention to what characters are doing. But the whole point is, they don't need to do things the same way other games have, and still be successful at providing that play experience. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting. But I mean, with Revival, 200 plus skills, a lot of interacting systems. I think there's a lot on the developer's plate. So, hopefully they have clever achievements that they're tying into that some way, or maybe the storytellers will be a big form of achievements. It did sound like that from what Snipe Hunter was saying. The storytellers assigning some things, so they may be handling a little bit of the achievements. But yeah, we'll see what kind of combination it is to create that gratification for that particular play style.
Cersei brings up in chat that in the last unicorn, one of the main characters was a wizard who was so bad at magic his master cursed him with eternal youth. So, great stories can be told there. Yeah, she says.
Nice. Yes, Cersei's always full of interesting narrative comments. Pretty fun person. But we are wrapped up for our time. But yeah, is there anything either of you two had on any other last mentions you want to say? Anything you were thinking you didn't get to say?
Not for this episode. I hopefully we'll have Polaris back next week, and we can talk about a couple of the topics that she was thinking about. We might get to this week that we didn't, which is the oligarchy thread and the pets, because I think those are both great topics. I'd love to hear her feedback on those. So um, hopefully we'll be able to discuss those two topics soon, if not next
Yeah,
week.
we'll see soon, if not next
Hmm.
week. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think most of what I had set up for this week was covered. I think we had some good discussion on those blogs for sure.
Yeah, and um, I said it earlier in the episode. This will be my pseudo last episode for a while. I'm going to try and make it in, hopefully once a month, just to hang out with the community some more and stuff. But Diggs is going to be spearheading Revivalcast in the near future that we know of. So yeah, you guys will look to him for updates and things like that on what's going on. He's in the forums a lot, so I'm sure you guys will have pretty good notice on what's going on with Revivalcast. But I am really excited for future episodes. I'm going to at least watch the replays of them when I can. If I can't tune in live, hopefully I'll be able to tune in live sometimes and cheer you guys on. So, but yeah, it'll be pretty fun. And so yeah, look forward to good content. And I'm gonna miss you guys a little bit. I just have a lot of stuff going on. So, but yeah, I will be back whenever I can. But it has been fun, and the next couple weeks, yeah, Diggs will update you. So I think maybe Polaris. I think Sailcat is making a big move right now. So everybody wish him luck in that. Um,
Moving to a new state.
yeah, moving to a
Yes,
totally new
that's
state.
a
So
big move.
it's pretty massive. I don't enjoy those cross state moves. Done a few of them. They're not too much fun. So, um, but that's it from us for Revivalcast. Uh, everybody, will see you next time. And yeah, I'll see you in the forums and Discord and IRC. So yeah, catch you later.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.